We're back reporting on this consequential race to replace the DA who is now leading this Trump org criminal probe in New York. Voters will choose among the candidates in just 12 days.
Manhattan DA Cy Vance,
whose office is investigating former President Trump.
Cyrus Vance.
He will not run for re-election.
8 candidates are vying for the district attorney seat.
Tally Farhadian Weinstein and Alvin Bragg.
I'm the candidate in the race who has the experience with Donald Trump.
I'm Eliza Orlins. I'm the only public defender in this race.
Lucy Lang, formerly an assistant DA in Vance's office.
A Vance exit would mean a new Manhattan DA in the spotlight.
And tonight, Tally Farhadian Weinstein joins us. She's worked as a prosecutor in the Obama Justice Department and as general counsel of the Brooklyn DA's office. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Ari.
Absolutely. We will get to the topic I mentioned, but let's start looking at the core of your job. How would you approach what is now a rising crime rate in New York?
Yes. Well, so, I'm talking to voters every single day and they are worried about this. So I'm glad that you started there because this is really the core mission of this office is to make sure that people feel safe everywhere, right? In their homes and in the street and in the subway and at work and when they're meeting the police. And this is always urgent, but it's particularly urgent now that we get this right and that we make sure that we are investigating and prosecuting the crimes that are really hurting people the most and holding them back.
I mentioned your experience. There's a lot of talk about police reform, and that includes reforming prosecutorial offices. You were tapped to run this exoneration unit, which is a big deal. But then, quoting here, it says, during the 4 months that you oversaw a conviction review unit, it exonerated only 4 people, which was actually lower than in the past. Are you satisfied with that record? Was that rate ultimately too low, given the problems identified?
Ari, I think that that's not the right measure. So first, let me take a step back and say that Ken Thompson and Eric Gonzalez built the premier conviction review unit in the country. This is really cutting edge to have prosecutors who are voluntarily going back, reinvestigating cases, sometimes cases that are decades old, and then voluntarily asking courts to vacate these convictions, either because the person was innocent or because his rights were grossly violated. And when I went to work for DA Gonzalez, he put me in charge of supervising this unit. And we kept a pace in investigating the same number of cases, really meeting the standard that DA Thompson had set out. Now, sometimes that will result in more exonerations and sometimes that will result in fewer, but the measure really is, are you continuing to lean into this important work, which I think is so critical for justice? And, beyond that, we also built out something that still does not exist anywhere else in the country, as far as I know, which is a whole bureau of prosecutors to be looking at other things that happen after a conviction. So to help people with parole and clemency and correcting excessive sentences, because this is also part of our responsibility.
Yeah, all important. I think I would just draw people's attention to there's the process and whether that's a good process, and then there's the results. So the questions about those results. Turning to the Trump Organization, which, as you know, is such a big issue in the current DA's office, you have the public reports that a grand jury has been convened. Based on the available evidence, do you think that was a legally justified step?
So, Ari, I think at this point you are following the Trump investigation more closely than I am, and you are more free to talk about it, as you know, as a lawyer. It would be unethical for me to actually get into any of the details of that case because I hope to assume this office and come in not having prejudged anything so that I won't be vulnerable to any charge that I did do that, and then be able to really dig in on my own and to carry on.
Do you think the office that you're running for, the district attorney, legally has the power to indict ex-presidents?
Sure. I think that's without a doubt and I think it's really important to affirm the principle that if you cheat and steal and hurt New Yorkers, it doesn't matter what power you go on to acquire or who you were at the time and who you go on to be, right? This is about those of us who are empowered to enforce the laws of the state of New York, to do that without fear or favor and without intimidation by any kind of power.
And if you were to win and take over for DA Vance, should voters expect that you would continue the cases that he's brought, the charges that he's brought, or might you look at them anew and drop some of them?
Well, again, Ari, I have to look at everything that is on the table and that's existing in the office anew. I was with District Attorney Gonzalez when he made his transition into elected office, and it is not only typical, but really required. I mean, that's what an election is about, for a DA, the new DA, to examine every case, and that's what I would intend to do. So I can't really make any predictions or promises about any open matter in the office.
Well, that's really the big question, though.
I mean, that's what.
Oh, go ahead.
No, please. I would say, it's hard to take that position, right? Because I know that people are eager to hear about the open cases that are on their minds. But this is also me demonstrating what it means to be a good and ethical prosecutor with the kind of temperament that we would want somebody in this job to have.
I understand what you're saying. The current Attorney General of New York, though, did take a bit of a different approach when she was running. Take a look.
As the New York State Attorney General, I will take on President Donald Trump.
He should be charged with obstructing justice. I believe that the President of these United States can be indicted for criminal offenses.
Are you saying now as a candidate that Attorney General James was wrong to put her stance out there for voters? And when you just said, oh, this will be hard, what's going to be a lot harder is if Cy Vance indicts the Trump organization and a new DA comes in, there's going to be tremendous pressure to minimize or drop that case. Shouldn't voters have some idea at a policy level what you might do with what the incumbent DA's caseload is?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying anything about Attorney General James or in what context she said those things. But what I am telling you is that I think voters understand that I can't, from where I'm sitting, just reading about this case in the media, learning about this case from people like you, Ari, make judgments about what is the right course and what somebody's culpability is. But, I was listening really, with intently to what you were saying before, and I loved the way that you phrased it. I think you said that this case is going to require unprecedented legal calls, right? And so I think if voters are thinking about this case, whereas this case being something that is typical of what an office of this stature might be called upon to decide, then they would want somebody in the office who is not at her first rodeo, right? Who has made unprecedented legal calls before. And that's really where I draw on all of my experiences across American legal institutions. I clerked for 2 terms at the Supreme Court. Definitionally, the 80 cases that the court gets every year out of 10,000 petitions require unprecedented legal calls, or they would not be there. I was counsel to Attorney General Holder, right? We dealt with lots of unprecedented legal calls. I love the
resume. I'm only jumping in to say we gave you 6 minutes, which is what will afford other DA candidates, and I got Ben and Jerry coming up. But I do think it's a public fact. You have extensive legal experience, so I appreciate you sharing that with voters, and I appreciate you taking the questions, Ms. Weinstein.